if Dead Space 4 was in production and like Visceral Games approached you again, you would be down to voice act in a Dead Space 4?
100,000%.
Welcome back to JKP Rising. One of the themes of Dead Space and Dead Space 2 was Nicole haunting Isaac and chasing him throughout the game, or just being there. And we thought Nicole was a real person. We thought she was still alive, but she in fact was dead, and she was brought back to life by the marker. Well, could that also work with other characters from the Dead Space series, like Hammond, Kendra, Norton, Stross, Danik? Could characters from previous Dead Space games make a return in a fourth Dead Space game for a good reason? There was a comment left on one of my videos I made a while back called How Dead Space Could Continue After Dead Space 3 Awakening, and someone left this comment. I know I've mentioned this a few times, but I think it'd be an interesting idea to play as Ellie in a fourth installment. Put Isaac aside for now until later parts of the chapter, because I would love to see the story come full circle. What I would love to see is like seeing Dead Space Extraction and Dead Space 2 separate DLC helping Ellie out in the game as the moons invade Earth. There are a few things I didn't like in Dead Space 3. A few of them were too much action, the love triangle which was too silly. It was a bit much like Gears of War, and it was too long. But there were some okay moments, including the crash landing to Tal Voltanis and Carver's hallucinations. What might happen in Dead Space 4 is Ellie will have some sort of hallucination in the game from the effects of the marker. What would be neat is to bring some of the characters back hallucinations from the first three, including the first time we were originally going to see in the third installment, Shadow Isaac. Now, Shadow Isaac is an egotistical jerk, sort of like an ex-boyfriend from hell, and he taunts her of what she had done to him, and he torments her sort of like what Nicole did to Isaac in Dead Space 2. It would be neat to bring back Hammond, Kendra, Diana, Nicole, Terrence, and Norton back in hallucination form in the last few chapters of the game, because it would be neat to see some of these characters back as we know and love. They would also take inspiration from games like the BIOSHOCK franchise, Alien Isolation, Prey, The Last of Us, and the TV miniseries Stephen King's It, along with the movies Alien, Blade Runner, and Event Horizon. We need the fourth installment to go back to the roots of the first two Dead Space games. I mean, I wouldn't mind playing as Ellie. I know my idea is long and too silly, but what do you think? So there's a lot to break down there. Really quick, tackling the idea of Ellie. I made a video a little while ago saying, does Dead Space need a female protagonist? And I worded that wrong. We need a good character. It doesn't matter if you're a male or a female, transgender, who gives a shit? We just want a good story, right? We don't have to be attached to a certain gender to make a good story. Now, we mentioned Ellie because she's been in Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 3, and a lot of people seem to enjoy Ellie. In terms of bringing back characters, we could see Norton come back like he did in Dead Space 3 Awakening for Ellie because they were in a relationship. We could also see something like Shadow Isaac, which was originally going to be in Dead Space 3, but who could be Shadow Isaac for Ellie? Stross could be a Shadow Isaac for Ellie, because Stross was taunting and haunting and chasing Ellie throughout Dead Space 2 and even removed her eye. Or we could see a completely brand new character, but that's just an idea on how we can bring back characters from previous Dead Space games. I think having a haunting, taunting Stross would be a very interesting idea for Ellie as a character, and seeing how she would deal with that, reliving those horror moments from Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 4 as everything around her is going to shit because Earth is being invaded by the moons. We know how strong the marker's hallucinations are, especially the Brother in Moons. Isaac got rid of all that hallucination in Dead Space 2 after the marker was destroyed in the imprint and his brain was gone after he got rid of Nicole internally in his mind. We see in Dead Space 3 Awakening that the marker does not really care about that because it can still make you hallucinate even if you got rid of your prior hallucinations. Not to mention certain characters that really didn't get to shine in the prior games now have a second chance to really show themselves as superior characters. I wasn't really impressed with Danik as an antagonist in Dead Space 3. I didn't really care for his character, but now this could be a great opportunity to kind of redo the wrongs of Dead Space 3. Danik did kidnap Ellie in Dead Space 3, so that could be a good way to introduce some claustrophobia, violating personal space, and if the developers want to tackle this heavy subject, maybe tackle the idea of being raped. I'm not saying Danik was going to rape Ellie in Dead Space 3, but he did held her hostage. He had her for a short period of time, so who knows what was going on there. Not to mention Danik's not really a nice person. He's very sick in the head. His unitology beliefs have definitely twisted his mind, so I can only imagine that his thoughts and his process are not up to par. Norton could symbolize abusive relationships, so Dead Space 4 could tackle real-world problems and kind of address them in a cool aspect in a video game way. Look at Lexine. She lost Gabe in Dead Space 2 Severed DLC. PTSD, so we could see some post-traumatic stress disorder and how she handles that. As we saw in the beginning of this video, Tanya Clark is on board to voice Nicole again for Dead Space 4. Nicole could come back to Isaac even though she was erased at the end of Dead Space 2. He got hallucinations when we thought he wouldn't get hallucinations, so who's to say Nicole wouldn't come back either? So there's so many ideas the developers could tackle for these characters and ways to bring back certain characters in a more sadistic way. Essentially, it's having the idea of characters that have wronged you in the past coming back to re-wrong you again. You try to get away from them, you want to get away from them, you thought their story was over, but yet here they are, even after they have already died, they have still found a way to come back and screw with you. Realistically, it's not the same character because they're physically dead, it's just a way for the marker to screw with you, but still, an interesting thought nonetheless. What are your thoughts in the comments below? Do you want to see characters from Dead Space 1, 2, and 3 make a return to come back into Dead Space 4? Are there some characters in Dead Space 3 that you weren't a fan of that you want to see maybe have a second chance at getting redemption? Do you like the idea of Stross chasing Ellie and kind of being like what Shadow Isaac was originally going to be in Dead Space 3, or have Danik be someone chasing Ellie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What are your thoughts on this? Do you want to see characters come back from prior Dead Space games haunting current existing living characters? And if not, how would you bring back certain characters if you want to bring back certain characters? Or do you just want to continue going forward? The characters in the original Dead Space trilogy have long gone and passed. Nicole was in Dead Space 1 and in Dead Space 2. Her story was wrapped up. Let's not go backwards, let's go forward. My name is James, I'm Jacob Rising. Subscribe for Dead Space 4, Dead Space 4 coverage, Dead Space 4 news, Dead Space videos. I also cover videos on BIOSHOck, Halo, Deus Ex, and Metroid. If you enjoyed anything in this video, please leave a like on the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.